Hi everyone, this is Rabia.
And I'm Ahmad.
And today we're bringing to you the second episode of Ever Wondered. And we're talking about...
serial killers. So why did you choose serial killers for today?
You know, I was just in the movie theater the other day and I saw the Jeffrey Dahmer movie trailer. And I started wondering, I mean, I understand, you know, what serial killers are, what they do, but how do they end up getting away with murder for so long? To become serial killers, really.
Jeffrey Dahmer, isn't that the guy who was in the Katy Perry song lyrics?
Yeah, he's the one who said was gonna eat your heart out.
Just for reference.
She's a beast. I call her karma. She eats your heart out like Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, that guy. So I was trying to figure out, you know, how Dahmer ended up murdering 17 people at least before he turned 31. I think he was caught when he was 31. And, you know, a lot of very interesting things, a lot of very interesting patterns come out. But, I mean, the most revolting thing about the whole thing was, you know, he got caught in June 1991, you know, after his 17 murders, at least. Were documented, but
17, right?
17, yeah, 17 were documented, and he was just 31.
It would be absurd if it was 70. Anyway.
I mean, there are, yeah. I mean, it's
more to come.
I mean, we don't know. Those are just the ones that we found. I mean, there could have been many more. Sometimes serial killers don't even remember how many people they've killed. Most lose count. You know, Jeffrey Dahmer was definitely one of America's most notorious serial killers. He got away with 17 murders before, you know, they caught him. But, you know, one of the most interesting things about his cases is that, you know, even though he got caught in June 1991, earlier, a couple of months ago, he had abducted a 14-year-old boy, you know, for the purposes of killing, because that was really his procedure at that point. He'd refined it. And this boy actually managed to get out of his house to get help. And so when Dahmer was at work, this 14-year-old kid, this little boy, actually got out of the house, and he was bloody, he was bruised, and he was completely naked on the street. And, you know, he found 3 women who were, you know, Dahmer's neighbors, and he was just completely hysterical. You know, these women they saw him in distress. They had called 911. The police was on the way. And then Dahmer came back from work, and he sees this kid, and he sees the 3 women, and he just takes the kid by the arm, and he's leading him away back to his house. And the women just intervened. They refused to let Dahmer take this kid away. You know, they said something was really wrong. They had called the police. The police were on his way. And they were really, really trying to protect this kid, which was, you know, wonderful citizen intervention on their part. But, you know, what makes it so tragic is that, you know, the police came, but when they came, Dahmer just convinced them that this 14-year-old boy was actually a 19-year-old man, that they were lovers.
Wow, yeah.
They were lovers. They were having a quarrel. He was just acting out, and really it was no big deal, and that they were just going to go back home, and it wasn't a big problem. And the police were completely fine with that explanation. I mean, this kid is bloody. He's bruised. He even has a hole in his head where, you know, Dahmer poured acid into his head. You know, it was just completely ridiculous. And they're taking this kid back, actually. The police led this kid back to Dahmer's house. And those women, they were hysterical when they saw what the police were doing. They tried to intervene. They made other 911 calls. And ultimately, I mean, they're very disturbing, those calls, if you ever hear them. But, you know, what's really...
those calls still exist.
Yeah, the calls are still on the records. Yeah. And what's really, really terrifying is that the police told the women to shut the hell up. I mean, that was actually recorded later on. The reports that the women were really harassed into backing off. And, you know, what happens is that, you know, Dahmer takes this kid back to his apartment. The police are over there with him. This kid is really out of it. You know, he's been, you know, Dahmer poured acid into his brain. So, you know, you can see why he might not have just made a run for it. But the police come into the house, and, you know, they're leaving the kid there. And they notice a smell coming from the house. And the smell was actually coming from a 3-day-old rotting corpse of a disabled man.
Of another person.
Yeah, another person, you know, who was actually a deaf-mute individual who Jeffrey Dahmer had killed. And his body was rotting on the floor. The police comes into the house. There's a body, and they failed to notice it. And
Wow.
it's absolutely ridiculous because, you know, later on when Dahmer got caught, he actually even said something along the lines of, you know, had the police just taken a better look, they would have found the body and they would have figured it out. But, you know, they just pretty much, they just peeked around, yeah, didn't really, you know, spend much time figuring out what was going on and left. And the tragedy of the situation is that, you know, had they just run Dahmer's name through the background check, they would have realized that this was somebody who was convicted of indecent exposure, you know, especially, yeah, he was a child molester. He was on the registry. He was
already on
the registry. He'd already served time for, you know, indecent exposure to young boys. I mean, this guy had a criminal record. But the police just left this kid there, and, you know, you might say that Dahmer was just an extremely lucky guy, or, you know, maybe he was charming, but, you know, the poor kid's luck ran out. Dahmer killed him pretty much within hours, and just took a
hours
day.
after the police
Yeah,
left, right?
hours after the police left him, he poured more acid into his brain, and this time it was too much, and the kid died. And all Dahmer did was, you know, take a day off work, dispose of parts of the body, because, you know, he was a cannibal. He didn't dispose of all of it, and just took a day off work, and, you know, life resumed. And, you know, it's just such a horrifying degree of oversight. You know, there were so many red flags. And, you know, this poor kid died when really he shouldn't have.
Well, I guess that's probably a one-off case. Like, there wouldn't be more like these.
You know, you'd be surprised. Ted Bundy, allegedly, I mean, you always have to treat Ted Bundy's, you know, Ted Bundy was the notorious serial killer who killed at least 30 people. Even he lost count. People say it's probably more than 70. That's what the police attribute to him. But he actually says that...
Sorry, 17?
No, probably at least 70 people were killed.
70,
right? 30 at least have been pretty much confirmed by the cops. But even they lost count. And Ted Bundy occasionally said that he killed more than 300 and some people. I mean, but, you know, anytime Ted Bundy says something, you want to be cautious because this is someone who's a master manipulator. But, you know, Ted Bundy at one point claimed that during one of the murder investigations, he went to the active crime scene while the police were, you know, finding clues. He went into the crime scene area, picked up the earrings and shoes of the victim he killed, and walked away, and no one seemed to notice him.
So it must be really hard for the cops to catch these guys.
Yeah.
What about keeping them in prison?
Yeah, you know, you're really right. They are extremely charming and extremely good at convincing you of something. I mean, this is a theme that seems to be really common amongst, you know, the most notorious serial killers. But, you know, Ted Bundy is actually almost as famous for his murders as he is for escaping prison. I mean, this is a man who escaped prison in the 80s twice. And the first time, the first instance of him escaping prison is actually like the most bone-chilling account of, you know, how intelligent this man was. And he planned the whole thing out. So basically, at first he said, you know, during his pre-trial hearing for his first few murders, he said, well, you know what, I'll represent myself. I'll be my own attorney. I don't need a lawyer, which is kind of a strange move for a guy, you know, because you probably need the best defense team if, you know, you're convicted of basically being a serial killer.
Yeah.
But this guy goes to the court and he's excused from wearing handcuffs and leg shackles because he's basically an attorney, not just a criminal in the court. So he does that, and then when the court breaks for recess, he asks the court permission to go to the library to research, you know, for his case. And what happens then is, you know, he walks to the library on the second floor. He goes behind a bookshelf, opens the second floor window, and just jumps out, takes his clothes off, and walks off. I mean, he literally just walked off. And of course, I mean, the one miscalculation that he may have made is that, you know, he sprained his ankle during the jump. But, you know, the police figured out he was missing. There was a manhunt, roadblocks. But, you know, Ted Bundy literally just walked around the roadblocks, went into the woods, broke into a trailer, got a rifle, got food, got, you know,
He
shelter.
got a rifle as well.
He got a rifle as well. He figured, yeah, Ted Bundy got his hand on a rifle. He got food. He got clothes. I mean, then he broke into another one, you know, the first one he broke into, he got a rifle. The second one, he just got food and stuff. And he was really, what Ted was trying to do was there were true trails in those woods that would lead him on foot to where he wanted to go, his destination. But he couldn't find them. He got lost. You know, maybe he didn't have a very good sense of direction. And, you know, after 6 days, his leg was really hurting from the sprain. So he ended up stealing a car, and he went and he wanted to drive it back to town. But because his leg was hurting so much, he started weaving in between lanes, and a cop saw him. And so he pulled him over, really just for a regular traffic stop. And lo and behold, it's this guy who's been missing for 6 days, who's been convicted of at least killing 30 people, probably around 670, claims he killed over 300. And really, the only reason they caught him was the guy had sprained his ankle and he, made a mistake. And, when they found him, they found maps, details of the whole area. God. But, and you would think...
So it was like all planned out.
It was completely planned out. I mean, this guy is a mastermind. If you ever watch his interviews, you realize that he is just insanely good at planning things around. And, he's very good at convincing people. He's extremely charming. And when they executed him by the electric chair, tens of women wrote letters to the correctional facility saying that they were devastated. And police later found out it was because they thought that Ted Bundy was the one for them. He was so charming. And this is a guy who,
wow.
targeted women mainly. So, I mean, it's just completely ridiculous. This man was very convincing. He was very dangerous. And this was, like I said, it was just the first time that he pulled this off. He did that again sometime later. So this is a guy who broke from prison twice. And God knows how many more times he would have done it had he not been executed, really.
And do these serial killers... Are they of any use to the police in catching other serial killers?
Well, Ted Bundy is interesting in that regards because he, around the time that he went to prison, another serial killer surfaced around the same area that Ted Bundy used to, find victims. And that person was known as the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. Now,
wasn't this the guy in Seattle?
Yeah, he was also in Seattle, just like Ted Bundy. Although Ted Bundy also killed in other areas. And Gary Ridgway also, killed some people in, I think, Oregon. But, I mean, with Gary Ridgway, it's also... Gary Ridgway has the most confirmed murder count out of, these serial killers. He was absolutely notorious. He killed at least 49 people was what he was just convicted of, but the police think it was at least 90 women that he killed over a 20-year-long career. And, many things went wrong with that investigation, right? But one of the things that did go wrong was that Ted Bundy actually told the lead detective on the Green River case that he wanted to help him find this guy. And there's actually a book written by the detective who led the scene, in which he tries to work with Ted to find the guy. And one of the most interesting things is that Ted Bundy told this detective that when you find a fresh body, just wait in the area because the guy's gonna come back.
Because they're necrophiliacs.
Yeah, because Ted Bundy was a necrophiliac, he assumed Gary Ridgway was one too, and that's actually true. So the police didn't listen to him. But later on, 20 years after, when they found Gary Ridgway, it turns out he was doing exactly that. So had they actually taken Ted Bundy's advice, listened to the expert, really, in the field of psychopathy, they would have caught him. But, it's so difficult to really understand someone who has the kind of violent sexual tendencies of Ted Bundy and Dahmer and Ridgway. Ted Bundy almost seduced a psychiatrist who said that, this guy manipulated me even. His lawyers didn't want to put, pleas in the court because they just wanted to get done with him.
That's like the Joker and Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous, the kind of things that he managed to pull off. No one could agree on what was wrong with him. They knew that he was mentally sane enough to, be held accountable. But it was just ridiculous. Nobody could figure out exactly what was wrong with him. And it was very similar cases with the other guys. But, Ted Bundy, the Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer who killed people over a 20-year, career, really, could have been caught earlier had they just listened to Ted Bundy. But it gets much worse because, they did find Gary Ridgway. He was a suspect in the investigation of, the first few women that he killed in 1984. And they gave him the lie detector test, right? And at the time, it looked like he'd passed the lie detector. So the police pretty much
stopped. So when did he get caught?
2001. 2001. So between
years.
1984. Yeah, it was almost 20 years. And he was murdering people throughout. And bodies were piling up on the Green River in Seattle. And the only reason that he got caught in 2001 was because DNA evidence at the time was advanced enough to, link him to the murders. But, what's really ridiculous about Gary Ridgway is that, he was administered a polygraph or a lie detector test. And at the time, someone interpreted the results as saying, oh, he's not lying. But when they actually did the DNA test and they realized that, no, this is the guy, they went back and looked at his case file. and they realized that the polygraph results were wrong. He had lied. It was very clear. They should have looked into this guy in 1984. They shouldn't have given him another 16, 17 years of murdering women. And I mean, this guy had, his ex-wife said that, he would choke them. He was known for, using the services of prostitutes, which is the, main category of women that he killed. He was a deeply disturbed man. And there were just so many red flags in his, criminal files, that it's really incredibly disconcerting to understand that the police was just sitting on this evidence for so long, and so many people, all the way from Jeffrey Dahmer to Ted Bundy to Gary Ridgway, countless lives would have been saved had people just done their due diligence in the entire investigation. And it's really disturbing to know that even within the 20th century or the 21st century, these guys got away for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am speechless right now and horrified.
Yeah.
That these guys are out there, and the cops, I mean, they are doing their best, but at the same time, these guys are super intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of charm and intelligence and very, very crucially institutional oversight that leads these people to get away. And I mean, I'm not really blaming the detectives too much. It's a very hard job. The interviews of, the Gary Ridgway detective are really horrifying. He even wrote a book about working with Ted Bundy on finding this guy. A very interesting read.
Well, guys, this was our second episode that turned out darker than I thought. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also share it with your friends.
And freak them out a little bit. We have some very interesting books on the topic linked out in the description below. There's a book by Jeffrey Dahmer's father on Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood and him trying to piece out what went wrong, all the way to a book written by the detective who worked with Ted Bundy on solving the Gary Ridgway Green River killer case. So be sure to check them out. And stay tuned for the next episode of Ever Wondered, where we are hopefully not going to be as dark as we were this time. Yes. No promises, though.
All right. Signing out.
Hey, man.
Yeah.
I have to confess something.
What's up?
I'm a serial killer.
What?
I'm a serial killer!
Alright, yeah.